If today's government created vaults, what experiments would be conducted? Story 1. Imagine a vault where everyone inside is forced to live with constant scarcity. Food is tightly rationed, resources are limited, and the whole system is designed so the community always feels like it's just barely surviving. But there's a catch. Inside the vault, there's a sacrifice option. A system where someone can volunteer to give up their life so the rest of the vault gets a temporary boost in food, water, and supplies. The whole place is told that the volunteer is euthanized for the greater good, and that their sacrifice keeps everyone else alive a little longer. Except the person isn't actually killed. Instead, they're quietly moved into another sealed section of the vault where they live in complete luxury. Good food, comfortable housing, entertainment, everything the others don't have. They're even given access to camera feeds so they can watch their old community struggle and see how their decision affects the people they left behind. The real experiment wouldn't be survival, it would be psychology. How long does it take before someone volunteers? Do people pressure others into sacrificing themselves? Do communities treat volunteers as heroes or start seeing them as expendable resources? And what happens when the people living in comfort watch the people they left behind slowly change? Basically, it would be a long-term study of scarcity, altruism, guilt, and how people behave when survival can be traded for someone else's life, even if the truth is hidden. Story 2. A vault where every family starts off speaking a completely different language and none of them are given translators, shared schooling, or any official common tongue to unite them. Just drop them all into the same enclosed society and let the problem solve itself over time. At first, it would be complete chaos. People would only really trust the people inside their own household, or maybe whoever they can communicate with using gestures, trade, or repetition. Kids would probably become the first bridge because they adapt faster, copy sounds easier, and don't have the same pride adults do about how things should be said. Then the real experiment starts showing itself. Which language spreads? Is it the one spoken by the biggest family, the most aggressive family, the family controlling food distribution or security? Maybe the most useful language becomes the dominant one simply because people need it to survive. Or maybe a weird hybrid forms, and by the second generation, nobody is speaking any of the original languages properly anymore. That's what would make it interesting. It wouldn't just be about language, it would be about power, culture, and who gets absorbed into who. Whose words become normal, whose accent gets mocked, which families become isolated because they refuse to adapt, and whether the vault ends with one dominant language, a Creole, or a full social hierarchy built around communication. Basically, it would start as a language experiment, but it would really become an experiment about assimilation and control. Story 3. A vault where, at random intervals, officials secretly pull individual residents aside for private evaluations. During these meetings, each person is quietly told the truth, or at least what sounds like the truth. They're told the vault is part of a massive social experiment. But here's the twist. Every single person is told a different version of what the experiment actually is. One person is told the real experiment is about food scarcity. Another is told it's about obedience to authority. Someone else hears it's actually about identifying future leaders. Another is told it's testing how quickly societies turn on each other. Someone else is told the vault is studying religious belief. Another thinks it's about population control. Each person leaves the meeting thinking they're one of the few who knows the real purpose of the vault. The government never tells anyone else the same story twice. Now the real experiment begins. Do people keep secrets? Do they try to convince others their version is the truth? Do conspiracy groups form inside the vault? Do factions emerge around different explanations for what's happening? Eventually, the vault would turn into a web of competing theories. each person convinced they've figured out the hidden system while everyone else is either naive or being manipulated. And the scientists running the vault wouldn't actually be studying scarcity or leadership or religion. They'd be studying how humans build and defend conspiracy theories when everyone thinks they're the one who knows the truth. Story 4. A vault where the population is deliberately split into 3 factions, and each faction controls one thing everyone else needs to survive. One group controls the water systems. They maintain the pumps, filtration units, and storage tanks. Without them, nobody drinks. Another group controls the food production, hydroponics, livestock, whatever the vault uses to keep people fed. The third group controls electricity, the generators, power grid, lighting, life support systems. Nobody has everything they need. Everyone depends on someone else. To make things worse, the vault leadership constantly feeds each faction reasons to distrust the others. Rumors, manipulated reports, little accidents that make it look like another group is sabotaging supplies or hoarding resources. Meanwhile, the overseer sits above it all, technically neutral, with a tiny maintenance team and a handful of repair robots responsible for keeping the core infrastructure running. They're the only ones with full access to the vault systems, but they rarely intervene unless something is about to collapse completely. The experiment wouldn't really be about resources, it would be about power. Do the factions learn to cooperate because they're interdependent? Do they form alliances and trade fairly? Or does one group try to dominate the others by weaponizing what they control? Eventually, you'd see whether the vault becomes a functioning economy or a slow-motion civil war where every basic necessity becomes leverage. Story 5. A vault where everyone has normal access to Wi-Fi, streaming, games, messaging, basically all the digital comforts people rely on today. Except the Wi-Fi randomly goes down. Not on a schedule, not during maintenance windows. Completely random outages that last random lengths of time, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes an entire evening. And it always seems to happen at the worst possible moments. Right when people are getting home from work shifts, right when a movie gets interesting, right when someone is about to send an important message or finish something online. Sometimes it comes back quickly. Sometimes it stays down long enough that people start getting genuinely irritated. Nobody in the vault is told why it's happening. The overseer just shrugs and says the network is unstable. The experiment isn't really about technology. It's about dependency. How quickly does frustration build when people lose their digital escape? Do people start blaming the technicians? Do conspiracy theories start about who's controlling the outages? Do people eventually adapt and start socializing more face-to-face when the network goes down? Or does the entire community become increasingly short-tempered because the one thing they rely on to unwind keeps disappearing at random? Basically, it's a study of modern humans forced to deal with the one thing we've all learned to hate the most: unpredictable internet outages. Story 6. I think one would be like the one in Fallout. A vault where the sleeping quarters were segregated. People were assigned either orange, red, or periwinkle upon entering the vault. Race and religions were distributed evenly between the two. All the other space in the vault, food, entertainment, work areas, etc., was all shared space. Only the sleeping quarters are segregated by color. See how long it takes, all things being equal, for the two sides to start despising and hating each other based on nothing but the arbitrary labeling of a specific color to a specific sleeping area. The overseer would appear to be an AI program, but would actually be the research team conducting the experiment. Story 7. Plenty of interesting and unethical experiments to go around. Each person in the vault is ranked, with the top 5 forming the council with all leadership power. The only way to increase in rank is defeating a higher rank in single combat in the arena. Overseer is in charge of the arena, but has no political power past that point. Each person is ranked bi-yearly through a written test. Portions include history, science, and math. The higher your score relative to the population, the better your lifestyle. Overseer is the proctor and creates the questions. The government is created and chartered by the people. A regular vault, except the walls contract a few inches over the course of a year each year. Nobody knows, and the entrance is destroyed outside the vault door, so they cannot escape. Each person in the vault has access to a pistol with a single shot that they are expected to carry with them at all times. You are allowed to kill one person with this pistol for your entire life without repercussions. Overseer is in charge of the courts and security team. Story 8. A vault where the entire population grows up under the guidance of a single voice. Nobody ever sees him. From the moment the first generation is born, they hear instructions, advice, and guidance coming through speakers built into the walls. The voice teaches them how to farm, how to organize their society, when to repair systems, when to store food. Occasionally, the voice rewards them by activating technology they don't understand. Lights changing color, doors opening automatically, medicine being dispensed, maybe even weather controls inside the vault. To the people inside, it would feel like magic. They would never be taught what the systems actually are or how they work. The machines would be sealed away in areas only maintenance robots could reach. The voice would simply say things like, "Ask, and it will be done," and then trigger the technology remotely. Over time, the voice would become more than a guide. It would become a god, a protector, teacher, judge, maybe even a source of rituals and traditions. Generations would grow up believing the unseen voice was responsible for everything good that happened in their world. And then one day, it stops. No warning, no explanation. The voice disappears, and the technology no longer responds to requests. Now the real experiment begins. Do they try to repair the magic? Do factions form claiming they know why the voice left? Do some people claim to speak for it? Do they begin studying the machines and slowly rediscover science? Or does a full religion form around the lost voice that guided their ancestors? It wouldn't really be a technology experiment. It would be an experiment about how religions and myths form when advanced technology looks like magic to the people experiencing it. Story 9. A vault where volunteers sign up for a genetic enhancement program. They're told they'll be injected with experimental DNA, maybe something exotic like praying mantis DNA, to see if human biology can be pushed in new directions. Strength, reflexes, maybe even new senses. The volunteers spend months preparing for it. Medical tests, physical training, constant briefings about how important the research is. Then one day the announcement comes over the speakers. Those of you who volunteered for the mantis DNA injections, we've got good news and bad news. Bad news is the genetic trials have been postponed indefinitely. Good news is we've got a much better test for you. You'll be fighting an army of mantis men. Pick up a rifle and follow the yellow line. You'll know when the test starts. The doors open. A path marked in yellow lights leads deeper into the vault. The real experiment isn't about genetics at all. It's about human reactions to sudden, absurd threats. Do the volunteers believe the announcement? Do they assume it's a joke? Do they panic, or do they fall into a soldier mindset and follow instructions automatically? Do people question the authority giving the orders, or do they comply because they've already committed to the program? The mantis men could just be advanced combat drones or people in suits. The details wouldn't matter. What matters is watching how quickly humans adapt when the rules of reality suddenly change and authority tells them the only option is to fight. Story 10. A vault where every original resident is completely illiterate. Nobody knows how to read. Nobody knows how to write. Books exist in the vault, but they're useless because no one can understand them. Signs, manuals, instructions, all meaningless symbols. The population has to pass everything down the old-fashioned way, by memory and storytelling. Parents teach children by speaking. Rules are recited. Histories become stories repeated around meals and gatherings. Important knowledge, farming cycles, maintenance routines, medical practices, has to survive purely through oral tradition. At first, things might stay stable because the first generation still remembers the outside world, but over time the experiment becomes more interesting. Do later generations start inventing their own way to record information? Maybe simple drawings, symbols, or pictographs that slowly evolve into a writing system, something like early hieroglyphics. Or does the society remain oral forever, with knowledge preserved through rituals, songs, and designated storytellers whose job is to remember everything? Maybe myths slowly replace real history. Maybe practical knowledge survives while complex knowledge disappears. The real experiment wouldn't just be about literacy. It would be about how human knowledge survives, or mutates, when writing disappears completely. Story 11, Vault 000, Zero Privacy. First off, I would take a random segment of the global population, even numbers of males and females all aged 20 years old, totaling 100 dwellers. Design the vault to be an open floor plan, similar to a large dome, no interior walls, one really large circular bed at the center of the dome, mattress only, no blankets or pillows, one shower with 20 heads, no dividers and completely exposed to the rest of the vault, no towels, 20 toilets, again no dividers and completely open and exposed to the rest of the vault, no toilet paper but bidets, no TVs, no radios, no form of entertainment. The floor is just a concrete slab. No apparent exit and a single light source at the apex of the dome that waxes and wanes its intensity with a 36-hour day, 18 hours daylight, 18 hours nighttime. All 100 dwellers just wake up in this vault completely without apparel, absolutely nude. Food is distributed 4 times a day automatically for the first year from a kitchen-type bench along the wall of the dome. After the first year, ingredients and utensils are made available. The experiment. Observation of how the dwellers interact initially and as they progress through the years. How they handle procreation with completely zero privacy. Story 12. A vault filled with hundreds of people kept in long-term stasis. They aren't all awakened at once. Instead, every few months, the system releases a small group into the vault. 10 or 20 people at a time, with no explanation of where they are or why they're there. The only information they're given is basic survival instructions and access to a large, partially unexplored environment. The vault itself would be huge and constantly shifting, sections opening and closing, corridors changing. New areas appear while others lock down. Food and supplies exist, but not always in the same places. The early groups would struggle just to survive. Later groups would wake up to find a society already forming. Rules, leaders, maybe even myths about the vault's purpose. Some people would explore. Some would try to control resources. Some might believe there's an exit somewhere deeper inside. But the scientists running the experiment wouldn't actually be studying the maze. They'd be studying the society that forms over time. How do new arrivals integrate into an existing group? Do early settlers dominate later generations? Do myths form to explain the environment? Do people cooperate to solve the maze or fight each other for control? Eventually, hundreds of people would be awake at once, living inside a constantly changing environment none of them fully understand. The real experiment wouldn't be the maze. It would be watching how humans build a civilization when the world around them never stops changing. Story 13. This is going to get lost real fast since it's not one of the first comments, but I think a big vault full of around 1,000 families, all from different cultures. And what would happen is every time a child had a birthday, he would rotate families. The previous family would never see their child again and would have no contact or say in the raising of the child after it rotated. A child will continue to rotate families until his 18th birthday. You track the cultures and the qualities of the families that were rotated through and correlate that with the most successful children. Then try to isolate the rotation that makes the best children. Story 14. A vault filled with the heads of state from around the world. Presidents, prime ministers, monarchs, party leaders, all suddenly placed inside the same sealed vault with the same problem. The system requires them to appoint a single overseer to run the vault. The catch is that the vault will not function fully until they agree. Food distribution, long-term infrastructure controls, and certain systems are locked behind the overseer role. Someone has to be chosen, and the system requires unanimous agreement or a supermajority to activate the leadership controls. These are people used to power, negotiation, and influence in the outside world. But inside the vault, all their armies, borders, and economies are gone. Now the real experiment begins. Do they try to recreate geopolitical alliances? Do rival countries form blocs and try to push their candidate? Does someone try to manipulate the system and seize power unofficially? Do they negotiate trade favors or attempt diplomacy like a miniature United Nations? Or does the group eventually decide that no single leader should exist and try to build some kind of council instead? The scientists wouldn't really be studying the vault's politics. They'd be studying how the world's most powerful decision-makers behave when their usual power structures disappear and they're forced to build a new one from scratch. Story 15. One vault idea would be ridiculously simple. As every person walks in, they're handed a shirt. Half the people get red shirts, the other half get blue shirts. No explanation is given. Nobody says what it means. The staff just hand them out and move on like it's completely normal. At first, people would probably assume it's random or just part of the uniform. But humans are really good at finding meaning where none exists. People might start casually grouping together with the same color just because it feels familiar. Maybe someone jokingly says, "Typical blue shirt behavior," when something dumb happens. Someone else might say the red shirts are slacking off or the blue shirts are hogging the good equipment. Over time, those jokes would probably turn into actual beliefs. Little social groups would form. People would start trusting their color more than the other one. If something goes wrong in the vault, broken equipment, missing food, whatever, someone is eventually going to say it's the other color's fault. And once that idea is out there, it spreads. You'd start seeing arguments about which group works harder. Someone might try to keep score. Maybe people even start competing for resources or status. The wild part is that the entire division started over literally nothing. Just a shirt. The whole point of the experiment would be to see how fast humans create tribes, stereotypes, and rivalries even when the difference between groups is completely meaningless. Story 16. Imagine a vault filled entirely with the ultra-wealthy. CEOs, hedge fund managers, tech billionaires, major investors, basically the global 1%. People who are used to running companies, making deals, and having other people handle the day-to-day work. When they enter the vault, all their money becomes meaningless. There are no markets to invest in, no employees to manage, no outside economy. Just a closed system that still needs to function. Food has to be grown, machinery needs maintenance, Waste needs to be handled, and basic infrastructure has to stay running. At first, they'd probably try to recreate the world they're familiar with. Committees, leadership roles, maybe even some kind of internal currency or trade system. But eventually, someone has to actually do the physical work. Someone has to fix the broken pump. Someone has to clean the filtration system. Someone has to maintain the hydroponic farms. Those things can't be outsourced anymore. So the real experiment would be watching what happens next. Do people naturally step into those roles even if they've never done that kind of work before? Do certain people refuse and try to organize others instead? Does a new class system appear inside the vault where some people take on the essential jobs while others try to hold on to status? Or does the entire structure collapse until people realize that survival requires everyone to contribute in ways they never had to before? The point wouldn't be whether they fail. It would be seeing how quickly a society reorganizes itself when wealth and status suddenly stop being the most important resources. Story 17. One vault idea is actually really simple and kind of evil at the same time. Control the entire atmosphere of the place using nothing but music. In this vault, music plays constantly over the loudspeakers. It's not something people can turn off. It's just part of the environment, like lighting or ventilation. Everyone grows up with it and eventually treats it as background noise. For 6 days of the week, the vault plays calm classical music, violins, piano, orchestras, slow symphonies. Pretty relaxing stuff. Over time, people probably get used to it and stop noticing it much. Then the 7th day hits. Suddenly, the speakers switch to full-on death metal for the entire day. Loud, aggressive, chaotic. The whole vibe of the vault instantly changes. Work feels different. Conversations feel different. Everything suddenly has way more energy. Now you run the exact opposite experiment in another vault. In that one, 6 days a week, it's non-stop death metal blasting through the halls while people go about their normal lives. Eating, working, trying to sleep, raising kids. Just constant intensity in the background. Then on the 7th day, it flips to peaceful classical music, and that calm day probably feels like a collective sigh of relief. The real point of the experiment isn't music taste. It's watching how the baseline atmosphere shapes behavior. Do people become calmer and more cooperative in the classical heavy vault? Does the one metal day feel like a release of tension? In the metal heavy vault, do people become more aggressive or high energy? And does the classical day turn into a kind of emotional reset for the whole place? Over time, you'd see whether people adapt to the dominant environment or whether that one opposite day becomes the psychological pressure valve everyone waits for. Story 18. One vault would start with a simple but brutal setup. 500 completely normal people are placed inside. Different backgrounds, different cultures, different personalities. Basically a random slice of society. Everything in the vault is functional. Food systems work, water works, lighting works. But there's one problem. There are only 125 beds. No explanation is given. No schedule. No system for who gets them. Just 500 people and a sleeping area that clearly only accommodates a quarter of them. At first, people would probably try to organize it fairly. Maybe rotating shifts. Maybe people volunteer to sleep on the floor. Maybe groups try to make their own bedding out of whatever materials they can find. But eventually, the real pressure shows up. Who decides who gets the beds? Do leaders naturally emerge to organize a fair rotation? Do stronger or more aggressive groups simply claim them? Do alliances form around protecting sleeping space? Do people trade favors or resources just to get a place to sleep? Over time, the beds would probably turn into the most valuable resource in the entire vault. Not food, not tools, just sleep. And the real experiment would be watching how quickly a society forms rules or breaks them when something as basic as rest suddenly becomes scarce. Story 19. Another vault could focus entirely on how education shapes a society. In this vault, people live normal lives and raise families. But there's one rule everyone knows from the start. When a child is born, the child is immediately taken away. No contact, no visits. The children are raised in a completely separate section of the vault by robots. The robots handle everything: food, safety, sleep schedules, health care. The only thing they actively teach is mathematics. No history, no politics, no social norms, no cultural traditions. Just math, numbers, logic, patterns, problem solving. Their entire education is built around abstract reasoning and analytical thinking. They grow up in a quiet, controlled environment, focused almost entirely on solving problems. Then, when they turn 18, they're released into the main vault. Suddenly, they're meeting their parents for the first time. They're encountering a messy human society full of emotions, traditions, arguments, and irrational decisions they've never been taught to understand. The experiment would be fascinating. Story 20. One vault idea would honestly just be testing how strong people's morals are when survival is on the line. The vault population would be made up entirely of hardcore vegans. People who are very committed to not harming animals under any circumstances. When they enter the vault, everything looks normal at first. There are tools, kitchens, storage rooms, water systems, the usual survival equipment you'd expect. But then they realize something important. There are no plant foods at all. No crops, no grains, no vegetables, nothing that fits a vegan diet. Instead, the vault is full of live animals, chickens, goats, maybe fish tanks, things like that. The animals are alive and healthy, and the vault also has everything needed to care for them. And right next to that, the vault also has everything someone would need if they decided to butcher and cook them. Knives, cooking equipment, freezers, all of it. Nobody is told what to do. The overseer never gives instructions. The system just lets them figure it out. At first, people would probably try to find another way. Maybe someone searches for hidden food stores. Maybe they try to survive on extremely limited resources or figure out if milk or eggs are an option without killing the animals. But eventually, the question becomes unavoidable. How long do people stick to their principles when survival is involved? Some people might refuse completely and starve. Others might argue that survival changes the moral rules. You'd probably see debates, arguments, maybe even factions forming between people who refuse to harm animals and people who decide they have to adapt. The whole point of the experiment would be seeing how flexible human ethics actually are when reality pushes back hard enough. Story 21. One vault would test what happens when people are forced to do work that has absolutely no purpose. Every morning, the dwellers are sent into separate workrooms. Inside each room is some kind of task they have to complete before the door unlocks. Turning a giant crank, stacking and unstacking blocks, pushing a lever thousands of times. Stuff that clearly doesn't actually produce anything useful. Think of those old Victorian prison treadmills where prisoners just walked all day to power nothing. At first, people would probably just do the work because they assume there must be a reason for it. But after a while, the reality would start to sink in. The tasks don't actually matter. Then, the real experiment begins. How long before people start looking for ways to cheat the system? Maybe someone figures out how to jam the crank so it spins itself. Maybe groups start coordinating to trick the sensors. Maybe someone builds a tool that completes the task automatically. Or maybe something else happens. When people realize the work is meaningless, some might stop trying entirely. Others might start inventing games or competitions to make the task bearable. Some people might even start treating it like meditation and develop weird mental tricks just to get through the hours. The point wouldn't be the task itself. It would be seeing how humans react to pointless labor, whether they try to escape it, outsmart it, or simply adapt to it psychologically. Story 22. One vault idea would be about culture and media. Everyone in the vault is divided into completely separate pods. The pods can't interact at first, and each one only has access to a very specific type of entertainment and media. One pod basically gets what people would call high culture. They can only watch critically acclaimed films, listen to classical composers, read literary classics, and play puzzle or artistic games like Portal or Limbo. Everything they consume is meant to be thoughtful, slow, and intellectually challenging. The other pod gets the opposite kind of media diet. Reality TV like The Real Housewives, celebrity magazines, blockbuster action movies, trashy romance novels, mainstream pop music, and fast-paced games like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto. Grand. Stuff that's more about spectacle, drama, and instant entertainment. Both groups grow up in their own media bubble. They'd be tested over time on things like problem solving, attention span, emotional reactions, cooperation, and social behavior. Basically trying to see if the type of media people consume long-term actually changes how they think or behave. Then eventually, the walls between pods open. Now, the two groups meet each other for the first time. Do they see the other group as weird? Do stereotypes form immediately? Do they mix together easily or stay in their own cultural tribes? The real experiment would be finding out how much the media environment shapes personality, intelligence, and social identity over time. Story 23, one vault would start completely normal. Lights work. The schedule is predictable. People get used to the routine of living underground. After about a year, the residents probably settle into a stable society. Jobs are assigned, social groups form, people get comfortable with the environment. Then one day the lights go out. Not just dimmed, completely gone. Emergency lights never kick in. The vault is suddenly in permanent darkness. People still have food systems, water, and whatever small light sources they can create themselves, but the vault's main lighting system never comes back online. The community has to figure out how to function in near total darkness. Days and nights lose meaning. Sleep schedules drift. People start navigating the vault by memory, touch, and sound instead of sight. Some areas might become completely avoided because nobody wants to move through pitch-black corridors. And this continues for 5 years. Children would grow up barely remembering what normal lighting looked like. People might start reorganizing their lives around tiny sources of light like candles or small generators. Others might adapt and move almost entirely through darkness. Then after 5 years, the vault doors open. Now the experiment shifts again. How do people who have lived in darkness for half a decade react to sunlight? Do they hesitate to leave? Are their eyes able to handle it? Do some people prefer the dark environment they adapted to? The whole point would be seeing how humans physically and psychologically adapt when one of the most basic environmental conditions, light, suddenly disappears. Story 24. One vault would be filled entirely with people under the age of 18. No adults, no teachers, no authority figures running their daily lives. When they enter the vault, they quickly notice something else. There's no electronics at all. No phones, no computers, no internet, no streaming, nothing digital. Just books, shelves and shelves of them. Manuals, novels, history, science, random encyclopedias. Basically, an entire library worth of knowledge, but all in physical form. At first, the place would probably be chaotic. People arguing, trying to figure out who's in charge, some kids ignoring the books entirely and just messing around because nobody is forcing them to do anything. Without phones or social media, a lot of them might feel completely lost for a while. But after some time, things would start shifting. Some kids would probably start digging into the books out of boredom or curiosity. A few might realize the books contain actual, useful knowledge: how to grow food, fix things, organize systems. Those people might slowly become the leaders or the experts the rest of the vault starts relying on. Others might still refuse to engage with it and just drift through the environment. The real experiment would be watching how a society forms when it's run entirely by teenagers who have access to knowledge, but no one forcing them to use it. Story 25. Honestly, the most realistic vault experiment probably wouldn't even get that far. They'd announce the project with a huge press conference. Hundreds of millions, maybe billions in funding. Big promises about protecting humanity, scientific breakthroughs, long-term survival plans, renderings of futuristic vaults, smiling mascots, slogans about how it's all being done for the public. Construction would start. They'd dig the first massive pit in the ground. Cameras everywhere. Politicians taking photos with hard hats. Then a corruption scandal would pop up. Some contractors overcharged the government. A few officials quietly steered the contracts toward friends and donors. Investigations start. Committees get involved. Lawyers pile in. Suddenly, the budget disappears into consulting fees, legal settlements, and a dozen different agencies arguing over who's responsible. The project gets paused, then delayed, then restructured. Eventually, everyone involved moves on to new jobs. New elections happen, new priorities show up. The vault program quietly fades into the background. Years later, when things finally start going wrong in the world, all that's left is a huge unfinished hole in the ground. Rusting equipment, half-built concrete walls, and a faded poster at the entrance with a smiling cartoon mascot saying something like, "We're working for you." And that's it. Hundreds of millions spent, and the only vault humanity gets is a construction site. Story 26. One vault would basically be a giant closed universe. The people inside would never be told anything about the outside world. No history of Earth, no astronomy, no maps of the planet, nothing. From the moment they're born, the vault is simply everything that exists. The walls aren't described as walls. They're just the edge of reality. The residents grow up believing the vault is the entire universe. The ceiling is the sky. The floor is the ground. The systems that keep the place running are just natural features of their world. Over time, people would start forming theories. Some might believe the rock outside the walls goes on forever. Others might think there are other vaults somewhere beyond the stone, maybe other civilizations hidden in the darkness if you could dig far enough. Philosophers might debate what lies beyond the walls. Scientists might try experiments, measuring gravity, airflow, or heat patterns, trying to figure out how their world actually works. The real goal would be seeing if anyone eventually pieces together the bigger picture. Could someone figure out their underground? Could anyone theorize that their world is just a tiny part of something much larger? Could anyone even imagine that they're living on a giant sphere moving through space around a massive ball of fire? Basically, it would be an experiment in how humans build cosmology when their entire universe fits inside a box. Story 27. Vault 484. The Better World. The vault itself would be pretty bare bones. Plain walls, simple living spaces, nothing fancy. No TVs, no music systems, no sports courts, no real entertainment of any kind. But there's one thing the vault has a lot of: a massive, full-sensory VR system. Residents have access to a shared server filled with games, simulations, and virtual worlds. They're also given tools and instructions so they can eventually design their own VR experiences and upload them for others to use. The catch is how you earn time inside it. The vault's basic systems, food production, water purification, sanitation, power generation, all require constant human labor to keep running. No shortcuts, no automation doing everything for them. For every 2 hours of work, a resident earns 10 minutes of VR time. That time is stored like a currency. People can save it, trade it, or even sell it to others. Someone could work long shifts just to build up hours inside the virtual world. Others might trade food, favors, or services to buy more time without doing as much labor themselves. Pretty quickly, the vault would develop two worlds. The real one, where people work long hours maintaining a fairly dull underground society, and the virtual one, where anything is possible. The real experiment would be watching how the economy and culture evolve. Do people become addicted to the virtual worlds and work endlessly just to escape reality? Do some residents build incredibly rich digital environments that become more important than the vault itself? Do people start valuing VR time more than actual goods? Eventually, the question becomes simple but unsettling. If the virtual world becomes good enough, does anyone still care about the real one? Story 28. Vault 207. Dungeon Crawl. When the residents first enter the vault, it looks pretty simple. There's only one floor. It has a limited supply of food, water, tools, clothes, and basic survival equipment. The power system runs automatically, so at least electricity isn't something they have to worry about. At first, it seems like a normal survival vault, but somewhere on that floor there's a hidden trap door. Eventually, someone finds it. It leads to a second level of the vault. This level also has supplies, more tools, more food, more clothing. But it also has something new: automated defense robots. They activate when people try to access the resources and offer just enough resistance to make things dangerous. If people manage to get past them, they gain access to the supplies. And somewhere on that floor, there's another hidden trapdoor. The third level has even more supplies, but the robots guarding them are stronger and more aggressive. And it keeps going. Fourth level, fifth level, sixth level, each one with better resources and more dangerous robotic defenses. There's one important rule though. No weapons are provided anywhere in the vault. No guns, no swords, no instructions on how to build them. If the residents want to survive deeper levels, they have to invent their own solutions: improvised weapons, traps, armor, strategies. The experiment would slowly turn the vault into something like a real-life dungeon crawler game. Do people cooperate and form organized exploration groups? Do some residents become specialists in combat or engineering? Do others refuse to risk the deeper levels and try to survive on the surface floor? Over time, the society might start forming around exploration. Stories about what's down below, rival teams trying to reach deeper floors. People risk their lives for better supplies, and the deeper you go, the harder it gets. In theory, the vault could go on forever. Story 29. Vault 523. The Celebrity. Vault is self-regulating without the need for human interaction and provides power, water, and food for its inhabitants. Vault is equipped with self-repairing iBots, programmed to follow a single individual and broadcast their every action to monitors installed in every room. Each month, a single individual is randomly chosen to be followed and recorded by the iBots. Dispensers produce a higher quality of food and water for this individual, as well as several amenities, including soap, fine clothes, alcohol, and weapons, unavailable to the general population. There exists, exterior to the vault, a reinforced viewing station wherein iBot broadcasts can be watched, edited, and broadcast over surviving television and internet channels. Story 30. One vault wouldn't really test the people inside it. It would test the system that built it. The entire vault would be constructed using the exact same process most large government projects use: contracts awarded to the lowest bidder. Every section, structural walls, power systems, water purification, air filtration, food production, all built by whichever contractor promised to do the job cheapest. On paper, everything would pass inspection. Safety reports signed, regulations followed, checklists completed. The vault would open looking perfectly functional and the residents would settle in, assuming the systems keeping them alive were built to last. But the real question wouldn't be about daily life inside the vault. It would be about time. How long before the cost-cutting starts showing? Maybe a pump fails earlier than expected because cheaper materials were used. Maybe the filtration system starts breaking down because someone skipped a step during installation. Maybe the backup generators weren't tested properly. At first, the problems would probably be small. Maintenance crews patch things up, people adapt, life goes on. But eventually something critical fails, and that's when the real experiment reveals itself. How long it takes before one cheap decision during construction turns into a chain reaction that threatens the entire vault. The uncomfortable part is that the dwellers wouldn't even know it was happening. To them, it would just look like random mechanical failures. But somewhere in the records, there would be a line item showing exactly where the problem started. The moment someone decided the cheaper option was good enough. Story 31. One vault would actually be incredibly comfortable. The residents would have access to basically everything they could want. Good food, nice living spaces, entertainment, clothes, tools, all the amenities needed for a pretty luxurious life underground. But there's one rule. Nobody can get anything for themselves. Every single resource has to be ordered through the overseer system using Wi-Fi. Residents request items through terminals or tablets, and once approved, the items are delivered by little automated bots that move through the vault using Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections. Need dinner? Order it. Need new clothes? Order them. Need tools or supplies? Same process. At first, it would probably feel convenient, almost like living with a giant underground version of online shopping and delivery. Except there's one catch: the Wi-Fi randomly cuts out, completely unpredictable outages. Sometimes it drops for a few seconds, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for hours, and when the connection drops, any orders being placed or delivered just disappear from the system. You have to reconnect and start again. So someone might spend 10 minutes trying to order dinner, the signal drops, the request fails, and they have to wait until the network comes back online to try again. Over time, the vault wouldn't really struggle with survival. It would struggle with frustration. People are waiting for basic things because the network is down. Bots stopping halfway through deliveries, orders disappearing, residents constantly refresh terminals hoping the connection comes back. The experiment wouldn't be about luxury. It would be about seeing how patient people remain when a comfortable life is constantly interrupted by small, unpredictable technological annoyances. Story 32. One vault would be completely normal in every way. Food systems work. Power works. The residents live normal lives, form a community, run the infrastructure, all the usual vault stuff. Except for one detail. The overseer is a cat, a regular house cat that wanders around the vault with a little translation device attached to its collar. The device converts the cat's meows into spoken instructions over the vault speakers. Meow. Attention residents. Maintenance check in Sector 3. Meow. Hydroponics workers, please report to the greenhouse. The cat itself doesn't actually understand what it's doing. It just goes wherever it wants, like a normal cat, napping in warm corners, sitting on control panels, randomly wandering through rooms. The translation system interprets the sounds and turns them into official orders. Now the real experiment begins. Do the residents take the instructions seriously because the system says the cat is the overseer? Do they start interpreting the cat's behavior as meaningful? Does the community begin treating the cat like some kind of leader or mascot? Maybe people will start trying to influence it, feeding it treats so it hangs around certain areas, trying to guess what a particular meow might mean. Over time, the cat might accidentally end up shaping the entire vault just by wandering around and making noise. The point wouldn't be about leadership. It would be about how humans respond to authority when authority is clearly ridiculous. But the system says it's legitimate. Story 33. One vault wouldn't really be about the people inside at all. It would be about the lie. The residents are told the world above was devastated by nuclear war. Fallout everywhere, the surface completely unlivable. The vault exists to protect humanity while society rebuilds underground. So the dwellers are given jobs that support the war effort, manufacturing parts, assembling equipment, producing materials that are supposedly being sent to the surface to help fight whatever conflict destroys the world. The message they hear constantly is that their work is vital. They're sacrificing comfort and freedom so the world can eventually recover. But the truth would be very different. There was no war. The surface is perfectly fine. Clean air, forests, oceans, normal life. The vault system was simply a way to move a large part of the population underground while they kept producing goods. Meanwhile, the wealthy live on the surface like it's a giant private nature preserve. No overcrowding, no pollution, no cities full of people. Just huge stretches of land, wildlife, and luxury estates. The people underground spend their lives believing they're protecting humanity. In reality, they're just supporting the lifestyle of the people above them. The real experiment wouldn't be survival. It would be seeing how long a society continues working and sacrificing when the entire purpose of their world is built on a lie. Story 34. One vault would run entirely through social media. No normal conversations, no private chats, no whispering to someone in the hallway. The only way anyone is allowed to communicate is through a vault-wide social media network that everyone can see. Every message is public. If you want to ask someone a question, you post it. If you want to argue with someone, you post it. If you want to organize work, complain, joke, flirt, anything, it all has to go through the feed. There are no private messages, and the rule is enforced brutally. If someone is caught talking face-to-face, writing a note, or communicating in any way outside the network, security systems activate immediately. Automated defenses gun them down on the spot. Afterwards, the system posts an update to the vault's feed. Something like, Resident number 204 violated communication protocol and has been terminated. And here's the part that makes it even stranger. Everyone else in the vault is required to like the post. If you don't react to the status update, the system flags you as non-compliant. The experiment wouldn't really be about the killings. It would be about watching how human interaction changes when every thought, opinion, and argument happens in public. Do people start performing for the feed instead of speaking honestly? Do popularity and follower counts become the most important social currency? Do mobs form when someone becomes unpopular? Over time, the vault would stop feeling like a community. It would feel like a timeline that never turns off. Story 35. One vault would revolve around a single machine. Inside the vault, there's an automated distribution system that controls all food and water. It's sealed, impossible to break, and the residents can't tamper with it. The machine simply dispenses rations to everyone at set times. At the beginning, the rations are enough for everyone to survive comfortably. But every 6 months, the system automatically reduces the total amount of food by 20%. No explanation, no override. It just happens. At first, people might try to adapt. Smaller meals, stricter sharing, maybe some kind of rotation system so everyone still gets something. But as time passes, math becomes unavoidable. There simply won't be enough resources for everyone. The real experiment would be watching what society does as the pressure increases. Do they try to ration things fairly for as long as possible? Do leaders emerge to manage the crisis? Do factions form fighting over access to the distribution system? Eventually, the population would shrink, one way or another, until only a handful of people remain. And at that moment, the vault door opens. The cruel part is realizing that survival inside the vault was never really about endurance. It was about what choices people make when the system itself slowly turns survival into a competition. Story 36. One vault would run its entire society through a data allowance. Everyone in the vault gets access to a wireless network. Messaging, entertainment, information, ordering supplies, basically anything digital runs through it. But there's a limit. Each resident gets a fixed amount of data every month. Once you hit that limit, you're locked out of the network completely until the next cycle. No browsing, no messaging, no entertainment, nothing. For people who grew up with constant connectivity, that alone would be rough. But here's where the system gets interesting. Data can be transferred between residents. If someone wants more access, they can buy it, trade for it, or take it from someone else. Think of something like the movie In Time, where people literally trade time as currency. Except here, it's data. So, over time, the vault would develop a completely new kind of economy. Some people would carefully ration their usage. Others might burn through their data immediately and try to earn more from other residents. Wealthy residents might hoard massive data reserves, while others live disconnected most of the month. And since the network controls so many aspects of vault life, losing your data might mean losing access to social spaces, information, or services. The experiment wouldn't really be about the internet. It would be about watching how people behave when connectivity itself becomes a scarce resource people can trade, hoard, or steal. Story 37. One vault idea would revolve entirely around internet data. Everyone in the vault has access to a wireless network. Messaging, entertainment, information, ordering supplies. Basically, everything digital in the vault runs through that network. But every resident only gets a fixed amount of data per month. Once you hit the limit, that's it. You're completely locked out of the network until the next cycle starts. No browsing, no messages, no entertainment, nothing. For people used to being connected all the time, that alone would be rough. But here's where it gets interesting. Data can be transferred between residents. If someone wants more data, they can buy it, trade for it, or even take it from someone else. It becomes something like the movie In Time, except instead of trading years of life, people are trading gigabytes. Pretty quickly, the vault would develop an entire economy around it. Some people would ration their data carefully to make it last the whole month. Others would burn through theirs in a few days and then spend the rest of the time trying to earn more. People who are good at trading or organizing services might end up hoarding massive data reserves, while others spend half the month completely disconnected. And since the network controls so much of vault life, losing your data could mean losing access to communication, information, and a lot of social interaction. The experiment wouldn't really be about the internet. It would be about watching what happens when being connected becomes a scarce resource people can trade, hoard, or steal. Story 38. One vault would be the normal vault, call it 100. Everyone has a gun. The set conventions are to work in a capitalist system for resources to promote utilitarian behavior. The schools teach creationism, and the curriculum is entirely up to the representatives. An electoral college represents the voters. All resources can be provided by 1/10 of the population, but anyone who doesn't do their job doesn't receive resources: food, water, lighting. Jobs are basically just routine labor meant to keep the people busy, are all tasks anyone can learn to do, but doing a job that isn't yours results in a resource fine. Representatives, the overseer, and the police all get extra resources and reduced fines in exchange for their public service. First, I definitely believe this vault would be made in actuality. Second, I wonder how long it would take for later generations to revolt, or at least to realize that the power they invest in the overseer is imaginary, while the power in the food they grow and the machines they work is real. Third, I wonder how the issues of forced routine and of measuring worth in community use would be faced. Story 39. One vault would run entirely on reputation scores. Every resident wears a small device that tracks their actions throughout the day. Work performance, cooperation, rule following, helping others, basically everything they do inside the vault. All of it feeds into a public score. Everyone can see everyone else's rating. The higher your score, the better your life is. Higher-rated residents get nicer living quarters, better food options, more entertainment access, maybe even priority medical care. People with low scores get the bare minimum, and the score constantly changes. If someone helps fix a system or volunteers for extra work, their score goes up. If they argue, break rules, or refuse tasks, their score drops. Residents can also rate each other after interactions. So, pretty quickly, the entire society becomes focused on maintaining a good score. People might start behaving overly polite all the time because they're afraid of losing points. Others might try to sabotage rivals by giving them bad ratings. Some people might figure out how to manipulate the system by doing visible good deeds while hiding worse behavior. Over time, the vault would probably become a strange place where every interaction feels performative. People wouldn't just be living their lives. They'd be constantly managing their public reputation score, because a few bad points could mean suddenly living a much worse life. The real experiment would be seeing how human behavior changes when social approval becomes the main currency of survival. Story 40. One vault would quietly remove the idea of leadership entirely. When residents enter, they're told there is no overseer, and no one will ever be appointed to that role. The vault systems run automatically, and all instructions come from simple terminals that only explain what needs to be done to keep things running. Things like water filtration maintenance required today. Hydroponics harvest window begins in 6 hours. Waste system inspection recommended. But the system never tells anyone who should do the work. There are no assigned jobs. Anyone can do anything. People can ignore tasks, cooperate, form teams, argue, or completely reorganize how the vault runs. The vault itself won't punish anyone for refusing work. But if enough tasks get ignored, the systems slowly start failing. At first, people would probably expect someone to step up and take charge, but the vault never officially allows that role to exist. So the experiment becomes watching what kind of structure forms naturally. Do informal leaders emerge anyway? Do people create councils or voting systems? Do small groups control certain systems like water or food? Or does the whole society constantly struggle because nobody has legitimate authority to make final decisions? The real question wouldn't be about the systems. It would be about whether humans naturally create leadership structures even when the environment is designed to prevent them.